I find myself becoming rather antisocial as I progress in my meditation. Is this normal? I don't know if I'm qualified to answer this. I've always been antisocial my whole life. So, I mean, for me to become a monk is just like, well, yeah, that's how I live anyway. But that's kind of a joke. Do meditators normally become antisocial? I think so, in one sense. And why I think so, and it's something that I think many Buddhists don't appreciate at all. Many Buddhists miss this, and even Buddhist meditators. The meditation centers where meditators will. There was one meditator, he was telling me, I'm sitting in meditation, and the person in the kuti on this side of me telephones the person in the kuti on this side of me, and you could hear it, right? This one's calling this one, hello, oh, hello, and they're carrying on a conversation with this person in between. The Buddha was horribly horribly is not the right word, but he was adamant about this, that a person who is undertaking the practice should not engage in any sort of socializing. Eka paviveka, one patisalanang, what's in the Ovada Patimokkha, pantancha sayanasanang. These words all mean finding a secluded place to live, place to dwell. The Buddha extolled people who are content. Narinchati patisalanang. A person doesn't throw away the opportunity for solitude, for seclusion. And again, he would talk about this, leaving behind society, because the point is, we're going back to basic principles, the understanding that reality is phenomenological in a sense, or even solipsistic, not solipsistics, but in the vein of solipsism, where my reality is only me, and when I'm with other people, I don't learn about reality, I don't learn about existence. I only actually give rise to more and more proliferation and clinging and views and ideas inside of my own head. Because I don't live their life and they don't live my life. When we come together, we still only create stuff in our heads, thinking, oh, that person's nice, oh, that person's mean, oh, that person's this or cute, no, or all of these ideas that come up. And we create more and more. That's what a relationship is. A relationship is the creation of something that isn't really there, that wasn't there in the first place, that doesn't exist in ultimate reality. So the only way you can start to learn about ultimate reality is to pull back and to come back to first principles: seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, feeling, thinking. A person who sees reality in terms of these 6 things is obviously not going to be a very social person, at least not until they can fake it. No. Because on the other side, I would say it's possible for someone who has been practicing for a long time to seem somewhat social, in the sense that they often interact with other people. But they won't do so much of the interacting in terms of asking about people's families and so on, and they won't get caught up in it. But they'll be able to interact in such a way that people think that they're being social, but actually they're thinking, well, maybe they're even thinking, get me out of here, I gotta go meditate or so on. But no, for someone who is enlightened, they would be in no way clinging to the people who were there, not thinking, get them out of here, but not thinking, oh, I hope they stay and I'm attached to this. But that's, I think, quite a bit later on. In the beginning, there are several reasons. One might become antisocial out of this terror that can come in meditation. The terror, the realization, when I'm around people, I can be a real horrible person. I can give rise to all sorts of defilements. And then when you're alone, you feel guilty. You feel, oh, what a stupid thing I said, and so on. And the realization that you do nasty, and you get into lots of trouble when you're in a group. And there's a lot of stress in it, and a lot of pretension. Most of our relationships with people are all just fake. We pretend to be someone. We put on pretenses when we're around people, and this is why people who begin to meditate will just freak out and like, well, I can't handle it, which is sort of how I was feeling in the beginning, because my parents were pretty hard on me and saying, that something was wrong with me and I should stop this meditation thing. I just thought to myself, well, eventually I'll figure it out, they'll figure it out, it'll all be good. And so I didn't have this concern that somehow I should fit in and be social. I was like content for now to be antisocial, and like eventually I'll figure it out. Because when you understand that the meditation is a benefit, it doesn't really bother you that you might be antisocial, or you might be offending other people. People might be getting angry. If someone gets angry at you because, for example, you're not interested in, because you're boring, or you don't want to go out for drinks. Hey, well, let's go out to the bar. I'm sorry, I don't drink. You purist or so on. Why don't you drink? Well, I believe it's unethical. Oh, then you're judgmental or so on, and so on. So anyway, just some thoughts on the idea of being antisocial. I don't know if anyone else have more thoughts on it.
I'll chime in. It's kind of ironic for me, really, because before I started meditating, I always had trouble talking to people. It was like, oh, I wish I could manage to, like, I don't know, like, especially with work and stuff, just trying to talk to everybody and be like, yeah, he's a nice guy and all this stuff, and I couldn't do it. And then once I started meditating, I found it a lot easier to talk to people, because you see the mind, you see what it's inclined to, so you could just say something and people will be like, oh, yeah, and go with it. And I found that it became a lot easier, but I lost the desire to. So it was, I don't know, I think that's just natural, because you just start to see, it's like you were saying, there's no usefulness to it.
He's saying it becomes harder and harder to tolerate gossip or delusion of others, for sure.
Yeah.
You get bored and you do start to feel like, oh, get me out of here. You're like, oh, yeah. Oh, get me back to my room where I can meditate. Because it's useless. You're not gaining anything, and you can feel them pulling you in. You can feel they want you to stay. And maybe you even want to stay, because you still have attachments to people and laziness as well, because you think, if I don't stay here, I got to go back and meditate, and that's no fun. That's a hard work. But for sure, you begin to feel the stress involved in group situations. What I've said before, how I think we can one way I think we can understand the idea of Kalyana Mitta, a good friend. I think a good way to understand what it means by a good friend is someone who leaves you alone. A good friend is someone who gives you the opportunity to learn more about yourself, who creates that opportunity. A good friend is not someone who sits there and lectures you and preaches to you. A good friend is someone who provides you with a practice. The Buddha said, I think at least in one place, the Buddha said, when he teaches thinking, what can I say that will get rid of them as quickly as possible? Basically, something like this, something very close to that. So, a very interesting teaching, that he wasn't interested in keeping them there listening. He was like, what can I do that's going to get them to go and, obviously, to go and practice meditation as quickly as possible, because the point is not to sit around and talk. Yep.
Yes, I experienced the same. That what was described earlier, that it's getting it came to a point where it felt kind of almost painful to have to socialize with other people, and I just wanted to go back to my room and meditate. And interestingly, this calmed a little bit down. It's not painful anymore. It's just I don't see the sense in socializing. I see sense in doing something like this, sitting here in a group and talking about the Dhamma, that yes, and that is kind of a social event, and that is good enough. So, first it was very kind of painful, but then it can relax again as well. So when you're not so tense anymore.
Yeah, I think you start to learn how to be true to yourself in a social situation, which does mean keeping quiet. But see, the problem in the beginning is not that you're quiet. The problem is that you're stressed, you're tense, even as a meditator. Because you have an example of like Ajahn Tong, people come to him, people will come up. Our teacher, it's so much fun to sit there. I sit there all day, and I met the widest variety of people you could ever imagine, and the widest variety of experiences. People came up and started yelling in front of him, "He's a buffalo!" and just the most horrible arguments, and Ajahn would just sit there and basically acknowledging it all, giving the right advice at the right time. These two monks came up and they were complaining about another monk. They said they were senior monks, and one of them was like 20 years, and they said, this young monk, he was teaching this senior monk, and I wanted to ask Ajahn Tong whether that's appropriate, because there's this monk in my teacher's monastery who likes to boss people around, and he was only a junior monk at that time. He's he's still a nabaka, a junior monk. And Ajahn just said, well, you know, anyone can be anyone's teacher. A novice can be your teacher. And they were all quieted down, and the other monk is like, don't. The senior monk was like, just don't bring it up. Let's go. And just there's so many different stories, and the people who would just come up to meet my teacher and just sit there and talk to him about the most, useless things, and he would just sit there, oh, and it was fun to watch, because we're sitting there in torture. It's like, oh man, get me out of here! An hour she's been talking about her arthritis. And he's like, oh, and he's like, oh, looking at her arthritis or so. So it does get easier, but you're no longer socializing. He's just being mindful and being, present and being perfect, really. I'm sorry. It's my teacher.